So the topic for today is religion and artificial intelligence. Um, this is something that I've been interested in for a while, and this is the article that I just showed on the Moodle page from Beth Singler, An Introduction to Artificial Intelligence and Religion for the Religious Studies Scholar. This comes from a journal issue, a special issue on artificial intelligence. And Beth states three particular reasons why it uh, could be of interest for scholars of religion to study artificial intelligence. As I mentioned, this has actually been an area of interest for me for some time. So I feel like I'm a little bit ahead of the curve here to some degree, although it has been an area of interest, but not something that I've actually done any kind of formal studies in. It's mainly just kind of my own interest. And a lot of that, I admit, comes from my interest in science fiction. Um, Now, she gives three different reasons why artificial intelligence would be interesting to be studied by scholars of religion. Here, I'm not going to list all three. I'm just going to jump to the third one, which I think for me is the one that is the most interesting. Um, AI as a potential new intelligent or sentient being raises questions about personhood. Okay, so that to me is something that I am interested. This is an area of debate that various religions have held dominion over historically, and they may well see themselves as called upon to provide definitions, perhaps resparking interest in religious views as well as internal discussions and so forth. Um, so for that's true. Historically, religions, philosophy, uh, has been the area for discussions about what is a human. In a way, the question sounds kind of obvious, okay? But when you start to think about it, to actually define what is human, some, I mean, in a sense, we could just go scientifically within a certain species. But what distinguishes humans from other animals? That has traditionally been the point of reference for that question. One of the answers, what is a human, is that humans have free will. Other animals do not have free will. So, in a sense, we don't think of other animals as being able to do evil. If an alligator attacks a zebra and eats it, right, that is natural, right? We don't attribute any kind of evil to what animals do. Uh, so that has traditionally been a point of reference. Now, artificial intelligence starts to add, maybe for the first time in history, a different point of reference. Machines. So machines, does a machine have free will? Does a machine have free will right now in the current state of technology? Could hypothetically artificial intelligence have free will in the future? So a lot of what the conversation is regarding artificial intelligence is speculation of the future. And the future is approaching fairly quickly, relatively speaking. I mean, if I just look at my own lifetime, um, I have seen some significant advances in artificial intelligence. And really, in the last few years, it seems to be an increasing jump in the development of artificial intelligence. Right? AI raises potentially questions about personhood. And some of these arguments have been played out in the thought experiments and publication that are our contemporary and heritage science fiction accounts of AI and robotics. Um, so getting into that, here's a little bit more. The mention of fictional accounts as part of this discussion. And in a lot of ways, the science fiction stirs the imagination. The science fiction starts to kind of speculate what could happen and so forth. Okay. Yep, questions that religions and philosophies have been asking for ages. What is a human? Um, okay. Actually, here, I'm just going to go through a few other questions. These are a variety of different questions that I've been asking. I've looked through PowerPoints that I've given. I mean, some of these PowerPoints go back to maybe 2018. I started to be kind of curious, like when did I first start talking about artificial intelligence in my classes? It'd be kind of interesting to see maybe which was the earliest time that I started. But it has been a few years, even before the most recent kind of surge in advancement in artificial intelligence technology. But here are some other hypothetical questions, and I'll continue to present a little bit more and then see about further discussion about any of these questions. What are possible future benefits of artificial intelligence? That clearly is one of the key questions, is how does it help us as human beings? What are possible future dangers of artificial intelligence? Sometimes in the popular mind, this is kind of an area that people don't really naturally want to think about. It's like, well, let's not talk about something too depressing as far as what kind of dangers there may be. Let's just look at what kind of positive things may be coming out. How is it going to help us? And so forth. Right? What distinguishes a human being from artificial intelligence? What are some of the questions raised to religious traditions, religious beliefs by the emerging technology of artificial intelligence? One of the other reasons that Beth Singler also gave as a reason for scholars of religion to study artificial intelligence was basically along the lines of artificial intelligence can maybe reinvigorate and kind of help in ministry and provide new forms of technology that religions can use and so forth. That's an area that I'm not particularly interested in myself. I think that naturally, some religious groups will start to use more artificial intelligence in various ways. The Catholic Church is typically much slower in adopting new technologies into like our rituals and so forth. And so the actual use of artificial intelligence is not really something that I'm particularly interested in. When I search on some places, like I've looked at Audible for books on artificial intelligence, and some come up that are um, how to use artificial intelligence in your church. And again, I'm not really interested in the details, like how am I going to use artificial intelligence? I'm interested in more of the big picture. What is the questions of artificial intelligence, and kind of how is this related to what will be happening in the future? How does artificial intelligence impact our future? Um, what are some of the challenges presented to help human self-understanding in relation to religious and scriptural expressions of humanity as in the image of God? Okay. To what extent could religious characteristics ever be attained by artificial intelligence? What are possible religious perspectives in favor or against artificial intelligence and so forth? What are ideas for making, oh, this gets a little bit more practical. For me, what are ideas for making a final exam in such a way that the use of artificial intelligence would be intrinsically discouraged, right? This is the most recent kind of I guess in my mind, I didn't quite foresee, even though that makes sense that this was down the line, that artificial intelligence would be able to start composing answers in a different way. During the pandemic, I switched from the traditional final exam, kind of everyone come into the classroom and write your answers with a pen on a piece of paper. During the pandemic, it was here are questions to answer at home and upload. Now there's the question, well, and actually it is in one of my other classes in the discussion forum. I am going to send a message to one of my students. The posts that you're posting in the discussion forums um, don't refer to anything specifically from the readings. And some of your posts also include some material that were not in the readings that are on the topic that the readings are on. And so looking back on a few of this student's discussion posts, I'm thinking, yeah, I think they're plugging in something into AI and posting their answers. I have noticed, at least in one case, not that I'm looking for it, but it's like, these are really good answers, but boy, they're referring to some things that were not in the readings. How did they know that? Did they read some other things? Oh, I think that could be artificial intelligence. Okay. Um, Artificial intelligence is now being used by the general population more than before. What are some of the ways? Okay, you use. Okay, that's another potential question. Right, so here again, the article from Beth Singler mention of the use of fiction, science fiction sources, and a reference to the Terminator franchise. That to me is actually the franchise that is the most interesting regarding artificial intelligence, the one that has kind of caught my interest. And there is the first movie that came out in 1984. This is a TV series for 2 seasons. I guess it was maybe more of like 1.5 season. There was a writer's strike right around this time. This is Terminator, the Sarah Connor Chronicles. And to me, this TV series really started to go much further beyond the movies in asking some of these kinds of questions about artificial intelligence that really kind of got my interest. Cameron is she is a Terminator. That is Sarah Connor, the mother of John Connor on the right there. And then Cameron, a Terminator sent from the future to protect John Connor. And so here I just kind of go into, I know that sometimes faculty will talk about amongst ourselves because we're old, and we say, oh, I was just talking about um, Harry Potter in class and nobody knew who that was, or I was talking about Star Wars and people said that they never saw those movies. I'm just making generalizations. I can't, I guess, yeah, and so I feel like, yeah, I mean, hey, that's the way it is. I mean, when I was um, like a 20-year-old, it's not like I watched all the classic movies from previous decades myself. So anyway, my point being, here's just a little bit of a summary. Now Terminator, oh, I guess it's the 40-year anniversary, or I guess it was last year. Okay. But yeah, Terminator, so yeah, the first movie that came out, the premise is that the Terminator, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, is sent from the future to 1984. So the interesting thing about Terminator is it takes place on Earth. And the first movie came out basically, not in the future. I mean, there is the idea that the Terminator is sent from the future, and sometimes they will show what that future is. At that point, the Terminator's artificial intelligence has taken over and caused the United States and Russia to launch nuclear missiles against each other, and the artificial intelligence wants to destroy humanity. The artificial intelligence is Skynet. And okay, so in 1984, the Terminator comes from the future to kill Sarah Connor, who will have a son, John Connor. John Connor is the one who leads the resistance against the Terminators and against Skynet, the artificial intelligence that is creating the Terminators to kill humanity. Okay. Along the way, a human from the future, Kyle Reese, also comes back in time from the future to protect Sarah Connor. Okay. And so the second movie comes out. The first two movies really being considered the two classic, all-time great science fiction movies. Terminator 2, in this case, a different Terminator. It comes from the future. Again, comes at a later date to kill Sarah Connor. And at this time, John Connor is born, and he's, I don't know, maybe 12, 14 years old, something like that. In this case, Arnold Schwarzenegger plays a Terminator that is actually sent back to protect Sarah and John. Okay, and so there's a lot that comes in with these movies. The third movie, Terminator 3, The Rise of Machines. Now, the other thing that happens in the second Terminator movie, Sarah Connor, as far as the attitudes toward technology, Sarah Connor, because of these experiences, the Terminator trying to kill her, She is very, very, very strongly opposed to technology, and technological advancement and so forth. Now, in the second movie, they discover that Cyberdyne organization that is working on the construction of artificial intelligence, Skynet, and all of these kinds of advances, they destroy the lab and basically essentially destroy, they're trying to destroy the technology that will lead to Skynet and the construction of Terminators, because they know that Skynet will launch the nuclear weapons against humanity. Okay, so now Terminator 3, again, these movies have a similar premise. Another Terminator comes back from the future again to kill John Connor. At this point, Sarah Connor has died. And Arnold Schwarzenegger's Terminator again comes to protect them. And the idea is that he says, well, we destroyed Cyberdyne. We destroyed the company and the lab that creates this artificial intelligence. The Terminator says, you delayed the technological development, but it did continue, and it did continue to come up to destroy. Sarah Connor Chronicles actually essentially ignores Terminator 3, and picks up the story after Terminator 2 and goes in a different direction. I've seen a few different kind of little popular articles on the internet, and they're like, oh, the timeline of Terminator is so confusing. And my attitude is, it's not supposed to necessarily make sense. It does go into different branches, so, but that's because of time travel. So, like, you're not supposed to necessarily say all of these different timelines make sense together. So you can just say, well, the Terminator 3 timeline, I guess that does go into the fourth Terminator movie, but you can also say, to me, I would say the first movie, the second movie, and then the Sarah Connor Chronicles is my preferred timeline as far as what to watch. Around that time, Terminator Salvation came out. That is kind of like a prequel, but the way Terminator works, the prequel is in the future because it talks about the kind of conditions in the future that led to the Terminators being sent to the present, if that makes sense. I liked Terminator Salvation quite a bit. There was one character in that movie that, in particular, he was a human, born a human, sentenced for a crime, sentenced to the death penalty, and somewhere along the line, rather than they also did experiments on him and kind of reconstructed part of his body with as a machine. And so actually he is captured, and the resistance, John Connor confronts him and is asking him, what are you? And he is saying, well, I'm a person. And then they'd actually opened up where his interior machine is exposed, and he looks down and realizes he's been partially reconstructed as a machine. that to me was an interesting thing as far as, okay, sometimes that question, what is a human, can be blurred in some ways. So that got me thinking. Most recently, and the one that I'm interested in talking about further today is an anime of a Japanese company that did an anime in this franchise, released on Netflix, Terminator Zero. So there is a scene in Terminator Zero that gets more so into the actual logistics of time travel than anything else in the Terminator franchise. Basically saying, well, when a person goes back in time, they create a new timeline, or it is a new timeline. They start to influence things so that it's, and I think that kind of caught my attention is quite interesting that they put that in, because I do remember thinking when the first Terminator movie came out, that doesn't make sense. He goes from the future to the present, and then he's John Connor's father, but John Connor was already alive and sent him. So to me, Terminator Zero actually has a scene that does an interesting, at least a stronger attempt than I've ever seen in this franchise of kind of explaining that.
Basically trying to get around the grandfather paradox.
Yeah, one of the questions a character asks, or part of the conversation is that, yep, it is true that when we go back into the past, to try to change things, we will change, we hope to change things, in a way that we ourselves will never see. We will not know the changes that we are hoping to implement, which, so that's an interesting, another kind of interesting angle. See. The time travel aspect of Terminator is interesting, but I guess I would still shift attention to artificial intelligence. That the time travel aspect, like a lot of fiction, I'm kind of like, yeah. You don't have to I don't have to get too far into any of the science or the philosophy of it. It's mainly kind of uh, part of the story. And I think if anything, not to get too much into any of the science of it, but it creates an interesting contrast. A little bit more, I think, kind of in a sense, a measure of truth and absolutism to the idea, yes, the way we know coming from the future that technology and artificial intelligence will go awry, as a setup for the franchise. And instead of people, I mean, even people today, artificial intelligence, is it going to just benefit humanity indefinitely, or will artificial intelligence try to destroy humanity? Well, I don't know. You don't know. None of us knows.
It could be more trying to integrate with humanity.
Sure, but at least the Terminator franchise kind of sets that up. Instead of like no one knows and we're going with this premises, maybe things will work out okay. Someone comes from the future and is like, nope, people, it did not go well. So it's just basically part of the story. And so I don't really kind of break down too much of the like, well, does this make sense or that makes sense? It's like,
It reminds me of like comic book stories or sci-fi of something, something, quantum, something, something. That's why we get this magic.
yeah. I mean, on the one hand, you could give more explanation to time travel in Terminator, but to my knowledge, like the actual technology of time travel is still like very much in the realm of fantasy.
Yeah.
That's why I feel like, okay, there's all like science fiction has all this different kinds of technology. Okay, well, time travel, that's kind of fun to think about, but in reality, I don't think any scientists are really anywhere close to it.
Because if we think of time in the way that general relativity does, time is just another dimension of the space we're in. So we're essentially like just moving through the universe, just in a higher dimension.
Yep.
So-
Is where artificial intelligence is more interesting because it's like, well, it is actually like I see artificial intelligence in movies, and then it's like, well, there is artificial intelligence in real life as well. So I've kind of done some kind of following up on artificial intelligence beating the best chess players in the world. There was a time where they also were working on artificial intelligence that would compete against humans in Jeopardy. Okay, so now to me, in my mind, as I think about how artificial intelligence could work, again, in a very, very general way. I'm sure there's books full of diagrams that say, well, here's how we program things, but in a very general way, chess, there's a certain number of moves, there's a certain number of pieces, certain number of spaces, specific ways for these pieces to move, a certain number of moves. That number could be in the trillions to the trillionth power, whatever, but there is kind of at least a certain set of rules there. Whereas Jeopardy is interesting, like how does an artificial intelligence, first an artificial intelligence has to properly hear a question. I have been noticing that speech to text programs have been getting better. I tried using speech to text in the early 2000s and was like, I give up. If I talk into the computer and have it translated into text and it translates 70% correct, I feel like that's not really enough. I mean, I need to have, then it's like, well, I have to go back and correct so much.
The time
I
it
might
takes
as
to
well-
correct it is more than the time it takes to initially just type everything.
Yeah, I may as well just type. So now I feel like, boy, it's getting like up into the 90s and, percent of what I say is accurate. Probably the one thing that happens is I pause as I'm trying to think of the next word to say, and it will make a period and start a new sentence. And sometimes a lot of one word sentences that I have to correct, but that's not too bad. Sometimes I'm using particular phrases in Sanskrit phrases from Indian religions, and it's like, oh, wow, it got some of these Sanskrit phrases correct, and so forth. So, yeah, speech to text is coming along pretty well. So some of the things about Terminator Zero that I find quite interesting is the character here is Malcolm. Now, Terminator Zero, it goes into basically a completely different story. It has nothing to do with John Connor and Sarah Connor. But Malcolm comes to the same timeline, and you could say, this could have been happening at the same time as the first Terminator movie in 1984. But this is something that was happening in Japan. It takes place in Japan, whereas the Terminator movies take place in Los Angeles. And Malcolm is working on another artificial intelligence. And this theme comes up in some of the other Terminator franchises. As I mentioned, Sarah Connor, her attitude towards technology is she opposes technology. She wants to destroy technology. Now, her son, John Connor, he grows up with computers. He's kind of a computer hacker. He often will use technology to fight Terminators. He wants to try to figure out, can I capture a Terminator and reprogram the Terminator? So John Connor doesn't always want to destroy. So Malcolm here is a scientist, and he anticipates Skynet taking over. And later, this isn't to give away any spoilers yet here, but later it gives a little bit more of a description of how he knows that Skynet is on this track. So Malcolm is creating an artificial intelligence that will fight against Skynet. That artificial intelligence is Kokoro, takes the name of a Japanese woman. And Malcolm goes into this room. It's like a 360 IMAX type of thing. And Kokoro will project images as Kokoro is speaking to Malcolm. Here is a key question that I find very interesting as one of the central premises in Terminator Zero. Kokoro, the artificial intelligence, poses the question to Malcolm, what makes you think humanity is worth saving? Okay, so that is one of the directions that 8th season series